Welcome to a new episode of Talking Out Cloud. My name is Danny and I'm the moderator for this podcast today. In my daily business, I'm leading the international strategy at Intercept. And today we will talk about data. A bit about the trends, a bit about the culture, about architecture fabric, and many topics more. With me today, I have two persons. One is Onno van der Horst, who is a data and AI partner solution architect working at Microsoft. And we've got a colleague of mine, which is Leonar. She's a data engineer. Welcome, and thanks you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Happy to be here as well. It's exciting to see everyone and to be in a studio like this as well. It's cool.
It's really professional, right? That's cool.
Yeah, I always enjoy talking about data, so...
Let's do that. But before we go into data, maybe Onno, you can do a brief of introduction about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so like you said, I'm Onno van der Horst. I'm a partner solution architect at Microsoft. That means I'm in the partner space. So there's a lot of technology partners that we really need, like Intercept. There's I think 9,000 of them in the Netherlands, but we only manage probably like 90 to 100 of them. And Intercept is one of them. So you have your own partner development manager. And I'm essentially his technical counterpart. So whenever you are in technical blockers, but also if you need any help with technical architectures or anything else, I'm here to help. I'm also a lot involved if you'd like to organize any events or whatsoever. And also help ISVs, so also the customers that you have, the software vendors.
Yeah,
I'm not in direct touch with them, but sometimes I'm helping out with some stuff there. Yeah, and I used to be a data engineer as well, so I used to work in Microsoft's own technology consulting team.
Cool.
And part of that, I've been working hands-on with data for 4 years, and now relatively new into this new role, helping partners. So yeah, excited to be here, and also looking forward to hear the stories from Intercept and the cool stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
great. Thanks. Welcome, Leonar.
Well, as you said, I'm a data engineer. I started out in data analytics, and I've been moving through the data path up to this point. I really like data, and I find it fascinating how we can get so much insight from it. And at Intercept, I can help customers with reaching any insights that they want from their data. Sometimes people have tons of data and don't know how much information they can get from it, how much value. So I'm here to help find that value and do the whole data lifecycle.
Ah, cool. And question, so is this more then related to the business or more to the data engineers from customers, or is it a mixture of it?
Oh, what you mean, sorry?
So you're excited about data, and you mentioned like there are tons of data with customers. So how would you approach such thing? Is it like from the technical side, from the business side, a combination
of it?
Well,
it needs to be a combination of both. So ideally, you want to have a good data culture in the company. So you want to have everyone involved as much as possible. So you need to have the business side involved also with the data engineers and data scientists, because while data engineers and data scientists can work the data, the business has a view on what can be inferred from that data. So it's definitely a junction of the two parts. And not only that, but all teams can be joined in that data cycle to bring value from that data.
Yeah. Ah, cool. Really interesting. Let's deep on this one later. So before we go into the data culture, maybe we can start with some trends. Onno, how does Microsoft see the current data trends?
Yeah, so how I see this personally is that there's a lot of data out there. And you see that it's increasing and increasing because we're living in a more digitized environment every day. So before, where you see that a lot of opportunities were on the structured data side, so on databases, operational systems, I think nowadays you also see that there's a lot of value from unstructured data. So there's documents being generated. There's also data being generated by you every day through your mobile phone. Those are all like semi-structured or unstructured data points. So what I see a lot is that there is more attention on getting value from that side of data as well, because I think there was already some growth in the past on more the structured side of data. So I think that's first of all something I've been seeing personally. So I think that's super interesting. A second piece, of course, is I think the growth of artificial intelligence with data. So what you'll see is that, with the easier accessibility of large language models, improvement of large language models, you see that there's maybe some interaction between data and large language models as well. So a large language model can talk to both systems as well as in a human way. So it can also talk, let's say, to data. Maybe we can discuss that later as well.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I definitely see. But also, going from maybe descriptive statistics to more prescriptive statistics, where you really analyze data and make predictions based on data. I think that's some of the trends that I've been seeing as well. Do you have anything to add, Leonor? Or,
It's definitely a trend that's been going. And we see that a lot now with like social media, where they're really trying to get as much value from data as possible. And for us users, we can also make use of that data. And we also need to understand that the value of the data and ensure security of the data. And now, as you said, there is a lot of not new, but of AI being used to also analyze data. It's becoming easier and easier to do data processing and to take value from data with these large language models. And it's definitely a trend that we're seeing, where companies are using these models to take more insight from data.
Yeah, and I think this also like what we've talked about, the growing amount of data also brings for also mostly the larger companies that you need to still have grip on that data. Like, your data is everywhere, but how do you make sure that the right people have only access to the right data, that all these amounts of data are secured well, but that you also have insight, okay, where does my data flow from? So it comes in maybe from an operational system at A, but where is it actually used? So you also see that a lot of new personas start existing within those organizations of, for example, data stewards or data lineage experts or whatsoever, that get your data, or that make sure that your data is governed well as well, besides that it's actually being processed.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I think that's super interesting to see.
Yeah.
And when you guys talk about creating value from unstructured or structured data, so what exactly do you mean by creating value?
Well, it's a bit like when you have tons and tons of data, maybe when you're looking at it, you cannot actually find any value in it, but there is a lot of value in it. It just needs to be processed the right way for it. So, for example, a company that has a store online, perhaps they have a ton of usage of the website available, and they don't make use of it, but you can use that to improve the user experience. If you find trends in the data, you can see how a customer wants to interact with your environment and improve their experience. We also see that a lot recently with some people that have been checking that on social media. You see different content depending on who you are. And this is also because your data is being used to tailor the experience for you. So it might seem like there's all this information and it can be used to improve your experience.
Yeah, and besides that, I also think that indeed you don't directly see value from data. So sometimes you need to present it in such a way that it actually becomes valuable. So there's, for example, data from different systems, maybe manual data that you have to add to that as well. And from all those systems, if you combine that data, it can and present it in a good way, it can actually give some insights. The same for, sometimes there is a pattern in the data that you don't see. Maybe you have to extract that. So I think for data analysts or maybe even data scientists that don't make predictions on the data, I think it can be interesting to see those patterns as well. So,
and sometimes machine learning can be a huge addition to that, because it might provide, it thrives in big data, and it is able to find patterns much more easily than a human can. So it can definitely provide a lot of insight from big data.
Yeah. Oh. Interesting. Really cool. So, and then I guess the question is like, where does it start? Is it more from an infrastructure perspective or architecture perspective? Or is it because we just mentioned a bit about data culture? So where do you actually start when looking into data or the trends and how to adopt it?
Yeah, I think like in the end, your end goal is to get business value from data. So indeed, there is a start from the, let's say, technology or IT point of view, but there's also a start from a business case point of view. So I think it's always good to first start with a business case. See what you would like to get out of the data that you have. You would need to have some basic data understanding, but a business understanding would be important as well. Like afterwards, you can go in like maybe do a proof of concept with that, see if you get some first results. But after you get those first results, you can actually analyze and maybe evaluate. Okay, is this what we were looking for? Should we continue and maybe go continue to actually production case? But I think it's always good to start with a business case, because we're technologists. We like to start from the technology, but it's not always the best. And I think sometimes the technology push can be there, but sometimes, yeah, if it doesn't give any value, then why would you do it? So,
Yeah, definitely, I agree. There's a need for data culture, a good data culture. There's a need for good data governance, data security. That is very important, since we're talking about each day we have more data that is stored and sometimes not properly secured. So good data governance is definitely also an important step in that process. So I think there are many areas here that need to interact to ensure the right approach to data.
Makes sense. And do we have a use case, for example, specifically on security and governance? On top of
I think I think security and governance could be for like a whole organization. So I think if you look from an organizational perspective, as a chief data officer, let's say, you would like to get insights into where your data is and to where it comes from, but also in who has access. If you want to improve such a data culture, like we said, I think it's crucial to make sure that you know where your data sits, but also who has access.
Exactly.
So I think on top of that, what would be super interesting as well is that if you would like to enhance such a data culture, people should also be able to look up all those different data pieces. So some companies organize their data into data products, so which would be a product that a data consumer creates, a data producer creates, and a data consumer takes. So a data consumer would, for example, be a data analyst or a data scientist that would consume that data and bring that into a report to, in the end, get the business value. So what I think would be interesting is if you also can get those people, those data consumers, to have insight into what data would be available for them and how can they request access on that. So I think that's, first of all, very interesting. Besides that, there's all new kinds of, or relatively new kinds of legislations, right? So we've seen GDPR, we've seen other legislation, but now we also get the AI Act in Europe. That really has effect on data and artificial intelligence as well. And yeah, you also need to do some kind of basic reporting out there, either internally to make sure that you don't leak any data, but also externally to make sure, for example, your data is separated from your customers or whatsoever, to make sure that you're compliant. So I think data governance also, the business case for that is not only the internal value, the data culture, but also I think compliance and legislation, that's important.
Yeah. Yeah, so it goes hand in hand, right? So on one hand, of course, you mentioned like the business value, but on the other hand, you need to provide the best security and governance at the same time.
Of course. And also because you lose business value if you mess up with the data, if you lose data, if the data is made public, you will see that impact your business as well.
Yeah.
And not only this, sometimes it's just the case that, for example, if a user does not want to have their data in the business anymore, you need to have a good structure to be able to provide to that, to fulfill that requirement. So there's two parts here. One is internally, you need to ensure security of the data so that you don't suffer a data breach, but also have a good architecture in place to ensure that you know where your data is and how you are processing it. So you need to have a clear overview of all the steps that you have in place for that data lifecycle.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about architecture. I think there's something called Medallion architecture, which is specifically related to the data part. Onno, would you like to elaborate on this one?
Yeah, so I think what you see is with vast amount of data, you would also like to give a little bit structure and also traceability on how you process your data. So something came up called the Medallion architecture. I think the Databricks has played a big role in promoting this.
Yeah.
But the Medallion architecture, I think, works as the following. So you'll get data in from all your different systems into one place, which would be a bronze layer. And you would store that as raw as possible. So let's say you have a system, maybe a software system. You take that out of that software system. You ingest it. It might come out of an API or whatsoever. And you just transfer it. You make sure to store everything raw, because then you can trace back as well, okay, where did this data come from and to what form did it come? So let's say all those files are JSON files. And let's say you have another system that you get data from, and those are all CSV files, so a different file type. Mm-hmm. In the end, you would like to maybe combine those different data sets. So what you do in a second layer, in a silver layer, is that you would make everything in the same format. So you would maybe clean some data, or in a JSON file. JSON is a semi-structured data type. You would like to make it a little bit more structured, so you probably need to flatten that file into a silver form. And the silver form would all be the same. I think nowadays a very common data type would be using a Delta Lake. So a Delta Lake would allow you to very efficiently store this, but also query it in a way that it's partitioned so that you can do it super quickly. So how I would see this is that, in your silver, you still keep, for example, the same folder structure as you would do in bronze. So you would align that to your source system. And when you have everything ready in your silver layer, you think about a gold layer. And a gold layer would essentially be the serving layer to your further systems and to your data consumers, potentially. Mm-hmm. So when you have that gold layer, you should not think from a source perspective anymore, but you should think from a business use case or business value point of view. Yeah. So I think something you could think about is, like I just gave the example, you have on the one hand JSON files from a system, the other hand CSV files. You might want to combine them in the end in the gold layer. So in that gold layer, what you would do is you would combine those files and, for example, create a star scheme or a snowflake scheme if it's more complex, but a star scheme on which you structure your data and making it ready for consumption. So this is a very common pattern, architectural pattern that we see in data and analytics nowadays. Because of the availability of the cloud, you can easily reproduce this data. It's relatively cheap to store that data. And you also have a lot of compute opportunity, so you can replicate that. Yeah. So where you see that traditionally it was really focused on ETL. So extract, transform this whole data, and then load it into a second place. You nowadays see this a little bit different, because you actually extract the data, then you load it already into your database, and afterwards you transform it and load it again. So actually, the ETL, like it used to be, maybe from a more data warehousing perspective, is not that much available in the Medallion architecture. But you can see that nowadays, it's done a little bit differently. Yeah.
Got it. And then does it also mean that it is copying the data in multiple data sets, or is it like still if you change everything, or if you change the data file in a later stage, like the silver or the gold one, does it like works back to the bronze layer as well?
No. So the idea behind it is to facilitate the access to the several steps of the data, and that you can trace back that data. So by splitting up the several layers, you can easily for example, if you want to add a new data source, you don't need to worry about the gold layer that is producing data for the outside. So the gold layer is the layer that is immediately available for your end customer or your end product. And if you want to add a new data source, it will be in the bronze layer. So you will not have to mess with the data that is in gold ready for production in order to do that. Not only this, but you can, for example, have different access controls for these several layers or apply different retention policies to this. So by splitting the data and as was already explained, it is split in a way that you start with the very raw data and you work it in a way that you make it more useful at each step. So, for example, you usually in the bronze layer import all raw data from whatever sources you have, either APIs or files, whatever. And sometimes this might have information that you don't really need, might have a lot of noisy information that you don't need, but you don't get immediately rid of it because in the future it might serve a purpose for you. So you store this in the raw layer, so in the bronze layer, but then in the next layer, you will start to clean it and transform it in a way that noisy information that you don't require is no longer stored in this new silver layer, but you still keep that information in the bronze layer. So there's not really a point in going back. You just want to move forward until you get the perfectly clean data that you can then use for your production layer, which is the gold layer.
Yeah.
Or it can be to immediately send to your website or for your reports. So the gold layer is the one that usually customers can access that data, while, for example, that engineer or data scientist would be able to access the middle layer to properly work it.
Yeah, I think that's a super good addition indeed. Like you also want to clean it on the way, and you don't want to get rid of all that noise. That's a really good addition indeed.
And then I'm back to the business value. So let's say we have a business value, we have a business case. So we understand, okay, we're going to investigate on this specifically in the data.
Yeah.
So how does it work? When do you decide to start from the data or from the business side? So how do you actually know if the business question has the data or the other way around? Like, hey, we have the data, so maybe this could be a business value we should get out of the data. So how would you approach this thing?
Well, I think it depends a bit on the situation. Sometimes it's the business that finds the need and comes to us and asks, well, is it possible for us to have this information, for us to predict something? So, for example, if a business has a lot of raw data and wants to predict how well a new product is going to do in the market, perhaps they have a lot of data on previous products. And we can look at that data and see the prediction value in it. So usually historical data is very good for this. So this is a way that it's the business that comes to us with a need and we find the solution in their data. Sometimes it's the opposite. It's, well, we have all this data. Can we take some interesting things from it? And sometimes it's possible to do visualizations with that data. And even if the raw data in itself, it's not really helpful in getting insights, once you have a visual from it, it's so much more intuitive for our brains to interpret that. So yes, I think it depends. What's your opinion on it?
Yeah, I think it should also be an iterative approach, right? So where you see that a lot of organizations first are very siloed. So you have your data department or your IT department traditionally that handles data as well. The business side, it might be far away from that. So I think it's good to also integrate both in a development process. So to work in an agile way or a DevOps way. Some people call it data ops as well. To make sure that you get constant feedback as well. So I would always say start iterative. So start small. Start with maybe some business people, a technical person like an architect, but also some engineers, and just start creating value together and start also creating and testing hypotheses together. Yeah. So you can also fail fast and make sure that you've learned from it, or you can see results fast, and then actually it's bringing you value. So I think it's always good to really work in an iterative approach in data engineering as well.
Yeah, because sometimes you don't even know how much value you can get from the data. So it's important to go through the process iteratively, because you might start with a purpose and then realize that the data you have is not the right data for that approach, and you have to go back and start over again.
Yeah.
So it's definitely it definitely requires go back and forth, and it's very important to have both technical and both knowledgeable people on the topic to interact with each other.
Yeah. And how can you use AI for such a use case?
I think it's really broad, right? So I think
Yes.
artificial intelligence is right now really becoming a super big buzzword, right? So yeah, it's actually super broad, artificial intelligence, right? So you can think about multiple scenarios. You can think about using machine learning, so getting insights from data that are not present in the data. So making predictions, for example, or in that way, use your data to make predictions. I think something new that's been realized over the past year mostly is you also using generative AI on your data. So right now you would, for example, be able to have a generative AI system that can talk to both humans and to systems. So talking to systems, talking to data, you would also be able to, for example, ask questions on your data.
Yeah.
So I think that's a super common theme you nowadays see is, let's say you want to create a chatbot, which I think is a common example of how generative AI is being used. You want to create a chatbot that uses your data, your operational data, and let's say you're a vendor that sells to, restaurants, and I want to ask a question about my orders, and I'm a restaurant owner, and I want to ask questions about my orders. Yeah, then as a bot, you would be able to work with this data. You would be able to get insights from the data and also share that in a usable manner. So I think data also becomes a lot more accessible to people that do not have a data experience or good data literacy, because what happens is that, data becomes available in human speech as well because of artificial intelligence nowadays, especially the large or smaller language models.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the key word. It's the data accessibility that you get, because with the newest developments in generative AI, you're basically making data so much easier to understand for people that don't speak data, because computers can now speak human language. So what these generative AI models do now is they can understand human language, they can process it in their computer language and then give it back in human language again. So it's really interesting to see that it's making data available to a lot of people that wouldn't be able to do all these developments without a specific knowledge about it. And it's becoming so much easier and easier to do very developed things with data. As you said, the chatbots, it's now so easy to do. And it's fascinating to see. And I think we will see more and more of this in the future. And I'm excited to see what's to come.
I imagine, cool.
I think it's also good to consider. Maybe we're going a little bit away from the data side, maybe a little bit more in the artificial intelligence side now. But like right now, the models have a certain performance, certain speed, also certain cost, I think, which sometimes makes it hard to get the value from it. But I think we should also realize that where we came from a year ago with GPT-3, for example, versus GPT-4o right now, like a completely different model that's so much more capable, so much faster, also so much cheaper than, for example, GPT-4. I think, this will only go up right now. So the performance of the models. Yeah. So sometimes it's maybe hard to see business value right now from generative AI, but I think this will only increase with the improved performance of the models in the near future. So
Yeah, Yeah, and a good thing about it is that you can automate tasks quite easily. So I think one of the best things for businesses here is that data engineers and data scientists can focus on more difficult, more specific tasks and leave the quite repetitive, quite simple tasks for the AI. So this will definitely bring value to businesses.
Yeah, for example, I'm also using GitHub Copilot a lot nowadays. So whenever I need to program, I'm barely writing unit tests myself. I'm using GitHub Copilot for that. And I'm really seeing that, especially in the software business, I think it can become super valuable to also allow your developers to use those kinds of technologies. So to use generative AI indeed to build your code. So I can think about how I need to write my code. That's still something humans need to do.
Mm-hmm.
But when I need to write something,
Exactly.
I'm actually having a little bit of help for that from generative AI.
Yeah, and in terms of automation, it's amazing what we can achieve with it because, for example, you can get an automatic report from your data insights. So you don't need a human actually writing that report, and you can define specific periods for this automatic report to be generated. So yeah, it's a lot of value that you can get from it.
Cool.
Yeah, so I was also thinking, right, your customers are also a lot of software vendors, right? So I recently, for example, called my dentist and I was thinking, okay, I'm now talking to a person. It's, by the way, personal opinion, but I was talking to a person or a personal finding. I was talking to this person and this person interacts with the system.
Yeah.
But in the end, an LLM could do both as well, right? So I think especially in those assistants kind of forms, I think that can also definitely, there's an opportunity there that can be integrated into the software as well.
Yeah.
So right now you see that the software is interacted with a human, and that human fills in things in the software. But it could also be that, in the end, an LLM would be connecting to those software systems.
Yeah.
So I think there's also a huge opportunity for software vendors. How do you integrate this, and how do you maybe take some of the repetitive and human tasks out of the human, so that the human can focus on other things and focus on the valuable face-to-face interactions, etc.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it also has to do with the maturity of the language model.
Yes.
Because it also has some experience, but then it's kind of in a limbo because it was asking me questions. I said the right answer.
Yeah.
Then it couldn't understand my answer. So it's in a limbo, like asking again.
Yeah.
Which is funny, right? But then you also experience okay, sometimes it's immature or still being developed, which is fine, right?
Yeah, and like I said, this will only improve over time. Yeah.
Yes, and definitely these for example, if we talk about a chatbot, we can use generative AI for a chatbot, but we've seen before that it's still quite risky to do so because it's still very easy to turn it around. So when these large language models were introduced, there were some cases where people were able to get the source code from these models directly from the chat. And we have a lot of situations where companies that are using them for chatbots have users talking to these chatbots and making them say bad things about the companies. So it's definitely a risky situation, and therefore there's a lot of growth still to be had. But it's definitely an interesting field that is improving each day.
Like the thing you described, right? I think called jailbreak attacks.
Yes, exactly.
So those jailbreak attacks. So what you see right now as well is that a lot of those platforms where you develop your large language models on now start integrating also content filtering for this. So making sure that both the input and the output is not that it is harmless, so that there's no jailbreak attack or whatsoever.
Yeah, but
you really see that right now that also the tech companies are investing in that.
Yeah, because they're so complex, it's very difficult to figure out every possible outcome from it. So yeah, it's one of the things that I hope will improve in the future.
Yeah, funny. And then I wanted to touch base on Microsoft Fabric.
Yeah, so Microsoft Fabric, I think, has been released in general availability a little bit more than half a year ago.
Yeah.
So what you'll see is that a lot of customers, both big and small, start already adapting Microsoft Fabric.
And maybe for the listeners, so what's Microsoft Fabric? Because I have kind of an understanding, but it helps definitely.
Yeah, I'll introduce it a little bit. So Microsoft Fabric essentially is a SaaSified data product from Microsoft that allows you to build, like I said, I think it's all around having a data culture. So essentially, it's a platform that uses different Azure capabilities that we already had, things like Azure Synapse, Azure Data Factory, but also other capabilities from, for example, Microsoft Purview for data governance. So bringing that all into one platform together with Power BI, allowing you to build effective lakehouses or data platforms centrally in one tool. And I think what really is new about this product is that every person that needs to interact with the data can work from the same platform, but at the same time, it's super open, right? So you're still able to use Databricks. You're still able to use Snowflake. So Microsoft also embraces, let's say, the open source and its competitors, I guess, with building this platform. And where you would, for example, see that Microsoft maybe 10 years ago, before Satya Nadella became the CEO, was very like lock-in, Microsoft or nothing. Nowadays, Microsoft is embracing open source, is embracing its competitors. And I'm also sometimes surprised to see all the collaboration that has been done. For example, now with Snowflake, I think a few weeks ago at Microsoft Build, an enormous collaboration and partnership was announced where you can actually have Snowflake data on Fabric being hosted there for free. That's something I would never expect to happen a year ago, but yeah, something I've been seeing right now. Yeah, so Fabric allows you to essentially the lakehouse architecture. I think it's perfectly built for that. So it's built for storing your data, or first ingesting your data, storing it, and then making it accessible to all the people that need to interact with data. I think that's what it's built for. And essentially, it's one platform, but it also has different experiences. So an experience that a BI analyst that would, for example, like to create a Power BI report is a little bit different than the experience, for example, for data engineers or for people that would like to create a data warehouse. So yeah, it's one big platform, but I think it's still specified for all the different personas that would like to interact with such a data platform. So yeah, I think that's super interesting. And also, I think for your customers, there would be like a large opportunity to use Microsoft Fabric. Because first of all, where you can use Microsoft Fabric for is using it as your backbone data storage with one lake capabilities. So essentially, all the data is stored in one place, in one lake. It's like it's being called, and this data can be accessed from everyone that has certain access. So for a software company, I could imagine that you would, for example, like to separate your data either among different customers that those software companies have. It could really be used as the analytics backbone as well of a software company. At the same time, I think what a lot of companies are already using is for example, embedding Power BI reports. So Power BI is now part of Fabric as well. So you can embed your Power BI reports in your application. So if you're a software builder, you can think of having Power BI visualizations with all the analytics capabilities beforehand. So let's say structuring your data, filtering data, etc., into a final report and embedding that in your software application. So I think that's another opportunity. But something recently released as well is that Fabric is creating is having partnerships with multiple companies, multiple ISVs that build their own apps actually on Fabric. So one of the examples is that Teradata, another software vendor, started to release their kind of AI capabilities as well on Fabric. So you can use the computer Fabric, use the one lake storage of Fabric, but still have your own software running essentially in there. Another one is, for example, the London Stock Exchange that has all their stock data from all the different stock markets. It's also exposed on Fabric. So it's another ISV that has created their own let's say, IP on Fabric and is able to publish it there. So recently also something got announced. So like a developer kind of guidance of how to do this. And yeah, you can find it on the Microsoft website. But I think, Microsoft's heavily investing in Fabric. You can see that there's a very large product group being spinned up there. And Satya Nadella even announced it as the biggest thing ever since the announcement of SQL Server. So Microsoft is betting big on Fabric, I see.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. I don't have much to add. I think everything was said. I think the most interesting thing about Fabric is the fact that it's a unified solution.
Yeah.
So you have centralized management. You have a centralized platform that allows all people involved with data to work in a single space. And this is also good, as we already discussed, for example, data governance. For access control, you can define role-based access control. It's a very interesting platform.
Cool.
I think what's also interesting is that it's a SaaSified version of a data platform, right? So before you had PaaS services like Data Factory, like Synapse, like Azure Databricks. But now in Fabric, this is all organized centrally. So I think one thing to really take care of is that you have good role-based access control, but also that your admin portal, so Fabric has its own admin portal, that's being controlled well, because otherwise people can just create whatever they want. You don't want to exceed your costs, obviously, or use your capacity in a way that you would not like to do so. So I think there's also a little bit of a shift from first very intensively focus on infrastructure as code and developing that infrastructure to more like, okay, how do you actually govern a data platform from a central governance, let's say admin portal and role-based access control in Fabric. So I think that's something I've definitely seen changing.
And you can apply it across all services, so it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, that sounds really easy, right? Because just one platform to manage it all sounds like it.
And I think it's an opportunity for both like larger companies, but also for the smaller ones. So you can really see that it's built for all different kinds of organizations. Because I've also interacted a lot with customers that are relatively small, like small, medium businesses. And currently they, for example, do a lot of analysis in Excel. Well, moving that Excel from Excel, doing analysis there to like a Power BI would already be a way how you can use Fabric and make it easily and store all your Excel files, for example, in the one lake storage. At the same time, it's also capable of doing very intensive data warehousing. So you can really see that it's built for all different sizes, company sizes. So I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting what you're touching on, because then if I look into how I do my business, then I also use Excel. Probably I should use way more platforms as well, AI, maybe other tools that are available. So I was thinking, okay, maybe there's also like a lot of potential still out there, right? Because people maybe do hear about the technology, about the platforms available, but at the same time, like, okay, where should I start? How should I approach it? So probably reach out to you guys. That's easiest. Yeah, interesting.
And one thing I would like to highlight still is like it's open to also work together with other parties, right? So Databricks, I'm a big fan of Databricks myself. Again, personal opinion. But Microsoft really embraces Databricks as well. So embracing Databricks and Fabric collaboration, for example. So you can still use Databricks capabilities of Spark, of maybe Unity Catalog, but still use Fabric as your one central place to store the data and make it accessible. So I think that's also a large opportunity. Same for Snowflake, same for others.
Cool. Really nice. Is there anything you would like to add to the listeners before we wrap it up? Anything you would like to share, use case, anything like, oh, this is also a really nice trend, or maybe some topics we didn't touch upon?
Maybe I would like to just share that people shouldn't be afraid of data and be afraid of AI. The important is to stay informed and ask for help. And it's definitely possible to get more value from data. We're here for that. We're here to get that value.
Yeah. I think as well. Like if you're thinking about the use case after listening to this, just start small. Just start iterative. Work together with both the business people and the data people, and really work in a kind of a DevOps way. So really start embracing a kind of agile way of working. So start with a business case, try to understand your data a little bit, and then make a small plan, maybe for 1 or 2 weeks, and then if you're done with that, then evaluate how did it go, did you actually get any value, and then continue. So I would definitely say start small and iterate.
All right.
Yeah, and I would like to add that we at Intercept also do workshops and mentorship sessions to help businesses understand their data better. And we are available to help with the full data life cycle. So even if business think, oh, we don't have anything in place, we cannot take anything from our data. Yes, we can. We can do it, and we're here to help.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much for the conversation. I really enjoyed. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Onno, Leonor, it was a pleasure.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, listeners. In our next episode, we will talk about a bit more about the infrastructure again, more about disaster recovery as well, infrastructure in general as well, geo-redundancy, etc. So listen to that one as well. Again, Onno, Leonor, thank you so much for listening to this, for being here and listening to this one, and wish you a great day. Thanks.
Thank you very much.